What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch, and with the Overwatch Contenders playoffs kicking off tomorrow, I thought it would be a good time today to break down some news and updates to talk about the Overwatch League, because when you combine all of the storylines of what's going on with it, I think you'll be surprised on how much better it's shaping up to look than a lot of early worries were about the entire system. It still has some areas where it has to improve, I'd say. Needing more global teams is definitely an issue, but there's a lot of things to get excited for, and I want to break those down here today. The first of which is consolidation of talent. The cream is rising to the top in this system already, which makes me very excited. It was an early worry that there could be sort of a issue with some players locking in slots in the Overwatch League, and maybe they didn't deserve it, or they weren't actually a very competitive team with the other high-end teams that are already in the league. And that comes from like an old school esports mindset, where oftentimes in other esports that don't have organized leagues, teams and players will just stick around forever because they're friends, because of other background politics. The opposite of that is happening in Overwatch League, and we're just getting started. There's teams that I was kind of worried that when they have to compete against the top tier Korean opposition, what would they do? The old NRG lineup, the old Cloud9 lineup, one representing San Francisco, the other representing London, was not looking to be competitive whatsoever, to be honest. But with an accumulation of moves, it's shaping up to be the opposite of my worry. Mid-tier pros aren't hanging around and occupying space to deny access for the top-end pros to come in and compete. There already is a competitive arms race between the teams to acquire as much talent as possible, and both of the teams I've mentioned have already done so. NRG dropped their entire old roster and picked up a lot of compelling names, including the famous $150,000 a year contract for Sinatra, which is good on all accounts. Competitive salaries for pros means that there'll be a bidding war for the best ones, and the best ones will want to play in the league, meaning that there's this continuous feedback loop that creates an economy around the talent. Now, until I see them play, I don't have really any faith that NRG will be taking the league by storm, but they're definitely at least making moves to be more competitive and change with the times, rather than holding on to players that weren't even competing in the Western scene, which by all accounts is a less competitive one than the Korean scene, which altogether is combining in one into Overwatch League. And one good example of that is the other team I mentioned, Cloud9, as well seemingly has been struggling to find a very competitive roster. They had a star-studded NA lineup that they quietly got rid of. They currently have one in Contenders full of EU players with middling results, which isn't too promising, but when all hope looked lost, they went ahead and signed Kongdu Panthera from Korea, who had just taken second against Lunatic High in the finals of Season 4 of Apex. That's a really big deal, guys. Kongdu Panthera is a league ahead of the other teams that Cloud9 was potentially bringing to the Overwatch League, making one big step forward for competition, and a team, if I was a local from London, would definitely be proud to have representing my city. Now, what you might be thinking to yourself is, what happens to players that get displaced from some of these teams? Players that are fan favorites, that are definitely competitive for some of their niche skill sets, but for whatever reason don't fit entirely into the top tier of pro play. Where are they going to go? Well, there's a really cool aspect of the Overwatch League where all teams have 12-man rosters. 12-man rosters? You mean so they basically have two full teams? Yes. It was already the case that Korean teams at Apex would oftentimes have a few substitutes, not necessarily a full team of 6, but it was the norm, especially with Lunatic High, who have sort of a tracer specialist in Guido, a Phil/tech DPS in Eska, and a dominant Genji/Doomfist player in Who Are You? That's the kind of lineup that we're looking to see in the Overwatch League, and it's very important because as metas change, sometimes you'll see more projectile heavy DPS, sometimes you'll see triple DPS, single DPS, depending on the different skill sets that are prominent in the current balance patch. Different types of characters are going to be key as well. Depending on the players you have, you might not be able to accomplish a certain strategy you'd like to do if your players aren't proficient enough at that given strategy. So what teams are doing is stocking up on enough players to be able to flex around and create interesting lineups that will be able to fill into these strategies. A team like Envious is very famous for this, really experimental stuff, more so than pretty much any other Western team that I know of. And one major element that you should be excited about is the signing of Seagull to Envious, if you didn't know. Now, Seagull is one of the players that was displaced from that original NRG lineup, which there's no other way to say it. The NRG lineup failed miserably, probably for a lot of reasons, but fans are really excited to see Seagull used somewhere in the Overwatch League, I'm sure. And the truth is, based upon his age and his limited skill set, he's probably not going to be a starter DPS, but he definitely can see some use, either for some niche tactical DPS swaps, maybe fill in the off-tank position. He definitely has the best Mei and Pharah on the squad for sure, so even just to cover those blind spots might be enough to warrant yourself a spot on the roster. And that's exciting because the narratives of the matches that are going to be going on in the Overwatch League will start to build up in this way, where you'll think of a team like Envious, who traditionally didn't have a projectile player or a Genji player. Even though Taimu in the recent season of Contenders has been pulling out those picks, some of them have worked better than others for him, and it's hard to say what level he would compete at when they're playing against other top-tier Overwatch League teams, because he's playing against largely teams that won't be in the Overwatch League right now in Contenders. A player like Seagull can cover those blind spots as well as add a bit of a tactical edge to the interesting strategies that Envious likes to pull out. It's hard for me to think of a world where you'd want to sub out Taimu, but it could be cool for the spectating experience. There's a few more aspects about the Overwatch League that I think are really shaping it up to be good, and these next few are about the spectating experience, because that's one aspect that Overwatch had been criticized for. It was difficult to watch, hard to know what's going on, hard to get a grip of what the win conditions and the narratives are. These are all things that I think the esports scene of Overwatch has already started to improve and moving in the right direction. At Overwatch Contenders, all of these points have moved a bit forward. The spectating has been better, the casting and analysis has been better, and one key point that I don't think is getting enough praise, they've implemented stat tracking, which helps give the tools for analysis, which has helped in both regards, because when things are happening on screen, key infographics can help display what the casters are talking about, or if you see a certain player who's either struggling or succeeding, stats popping up to show their dominance or weak points, and there's stats like first deaths, first kills, ultimate charge rate, things that are statistically meaningful to set up the narrative of what's going on. For instance, when one of my favorite teams, Rogue, was struggling in Overwatch Contenders, one stat that they looked at quite carefully was the rate that their support players were dying first in team fights in comparison to other teams in Overwatch Contenders. And that can be a very telling stat, and probably was one of the reasons why Rogue dropped out. Another point, when you compare like the Lucio plays of two different teams, which team more often wins team fights with sound barrier usage? This is kind of the really intricate analytical stuff that gets me all giddy and warm inside, and it's the stepping stones to really solidify Overwatch as a legitimate esports. Like, these things and small interactions do matter. They do tell the story, and they can help directly communicate that to the uninitiated viewer who's trying to get a grip of all the chaos going on in Overwatch, to pinpoint on key things that the casters and analysts can say, focus on this entity of the game. This happens in normal sports as well, which oftentimes might have either complicated rules or really nuanced play that's going on that's hard to see what's so beautiful about it, because if you don't know how to read it, it can just seemingly be athletes running on screen in haphazard ways, even though there might be some real set design to what they're trying to accomplish. Well, with all of these tools combined with better spectating cameras, replays, and the tools and the casters, Overwatch viewing is better than it's ever been. And hopefully it's going to be getting better. And I contest, with all of these things combined, heading into the Overwatch League, it's only going to get better. And though we've mentioned Contenders, I haven't really explained why that's even good for the Overwatch League as well, is that if you still feel like there's top tier talent that isn't making its way into Overwatch League for whatever reason, Overwatch Contenders is an open bracket. If you are a really good team, for example, FNRG FE was one that really has surprised everybody. They're a combination of elements from other disbanded teams, being Fnatic, NRG, teams that I have just been criticizing before, but they took players that could combine to be a successful team and have made playoffs and have a pretty good chance of impressing some of the Overwatch League teams and organizations to possibly have some of their players get picked up. not just win prize money in Contenders. So between Contenders as well as other third-party events that will likely be happening outside of the normal rotation of the Overwatch League schedule, players will definitely have a good chance to get into it. And the last point with the spectating experience is that having the best league be all surrounded one schedule and then having the other side leagues flanking it during the off season, I think promotes some of the most stable ways to watch Overwatch esports, because oftentimes it seemed to me many viewers were confused on where to find it, when is it on, where are the best teams. It's all really confusing and haphazard and split up, and honestly to this point the best competition has been in Korea. The most famous Western players are playing in Contenders, but there hasn't been major competition there though. It's been more of a display league for a lot of the teams to try to put their talents on the map. And now with the Overwatch League structure launching this year, everyone will be on the same page on what to view when. It simplifies it for everyone, and they can promote it in the launcher and really give it the Blizzard push to start esports down the road that Overwatch esports fans want the game to go. The beginning is here, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're as excited as I am, and if you are, leave us a like. It lets us know you're enjoying the content, and we really do appreciate it. If you did enjoy it and you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, because we upload each and every day, so you're gonna want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.